Hi, Kate here with another video. Hope everyone is doing well. This video is on Hawaii, the tragedy on Maui. I was going to originally make a video on UFOs, but some of my thoughts about what's going on. I don't believe aliens are actually visiting us. I think it's nonsense, but I have some takes and theories about what might be happening. But I thought Hawaii is the tragedy in Maui is more important. Right behind me is my dog, Micah, a new dog, relatively new. Had him for about 3 weeks now. My previous dog Max passed away a little over a month ago now. Older dog, and I got Micah to keep my other dog, Maui, company. So Micah is my companion right behind me. I died to sleep. Okay, so Hawaii, the tragedy in Maui. The beginning of this month was a horrific wildfire. So I'm going to talk about Hawaii, some basics of Hawaii, the history of it, some of the history, and then the current situation, some very odd things have been happening, very odd, a lot of anomalies, and I'll talk about some theories, takes on what might be happening there. And here we go here. And I'm going to have to refer to my notes at times, hope you will excuse me. Okay, so Hawaii is a state, it's the 49th state of the U.S., became a state in 1959. It's an only state which is an island or an island chain. It's 2,000 miles from the continental United States. What else? It's the, I believe, 11th smallest in land area. Oh, sorry, 8th smallest in land area, 11th smallest in population. The population of Hawaii is 1.4 million. 3/4 of everyone lives on Oahu, which is a small island, but it's the center. Honolulu, the capital, is there. Oahu's the center. There are like 8 islands considered main Hawaiian islands, but majority of people live on 5 islands. Let's see, the islands are Oahu, Hawaii. There's Hawaii, which is called the Big Island. The island chain is, of course, called the Hawaiian Islands, but there's the Big Island, Hawaii, which is much of the interior is volcanic. Something like 200,000 people live there. According to one thing, there's cities and towns there, but majority of people live along the coast. But Hawaii's the Big Island. So there's Oahu, I mentioned, Molokai, Lanai, Kaho'olaui, Maui, Niihau, and Kauai. And I may not be pronouncing some of these names correctly. People live on the 5 main islands, which are Hawaii, Oahu, Molokai, Maui, and Kauai. That place most people live. Island, by the way, Kaho'olaui, if I pronounce that correctly, no one lives there. It was used for a long time U.S. Navy bombing target. It was shelled by the U.S. Navy, like Vieques in Puerto Rico. Long campaign to stop that activism campaign. And the Navy finally stopped it. In the 90s, it was made to a preserve. There are 2 islands in Hawaii which are literally owned either by a family or by one guy. They are Lanai is owned by, it's 9 miles from Maui. 9 miles from there. 98% of the island of Lanai is owned by Larry Ellison, who is a co-founder of Oracle and CEO of Oracle Software Company. He literally owns 98% of it. I'll talk about that a bit more. And the island of Niihau, if I pronounce it right, is owned by a family. I think about less than 100 people have lived there, indigenous people, but the entire island is owned by one family. They're the only people who can go there, U.S. Navy people and some scientists. Otherwise, it's off limits to everybody. I think that's insane. I really freaking hate that individuals own a whole island. But anyway, okay, so a little bit about the history. Oh, yeah, so Hawaii, it's ethnically very diverse. One of the, 6, what they call minority states in the U.S. where white people, European ancestry, are in the minority. California, New Mexico, Arizona, might be other states, I'm not sure. But ethnically very diverse. 30%, the plurality, 30% of the population of Hawaii are Asian ancestry. That's divided between, I think the largest Asian group are Filipinos and Japanese people. Japanese people have played a big role and play a huge role in Hawaii, and the Chinese people and other groups. So a little over 30%, 7% are Asian ancestry. 10% are Hispanic, largely Puerto Rican. Puerto Rican people were brought over to work in sugarcane industry back in the 19th century as a Puerto Rican community. About 9 to 10% are indigenous Hawaiians. About 20% are European white people, European ancestry. Single largest European ethnic group are Germans, then Irish, and Portuguese and other people. About 25% of the people of Hawaii are mixed ancestry. It's very heavy intermarriage. 25% are mixed ancestry. A lot of people speak Creole, Hawaiian Creole, of course, in Hawaiian, English, and other languages. It's caught on with a lot of people. It's commonly spoken in a lot of areas, so it's some type of Creole. Okay, the main industries of Hawaii are tourism and the U.S. Navy. U.S. military. U.S. military is extremely ecologically very destructive in a whole bunch of stories, very polluting the groundwater. They pollute groundwater. They've destroyed beaches, enormously destructive. Everyone in the world, the U.S. military is very environmentally very destructive. Tourism is huge from the mainland U.S. Also, Japan. Hawaii has been for years, very popular with Japanese tourists. Okay, a little bit about the history of Hawaii. As far as we know, first people colonized, Polynesian-speaking people colonized around 800 years ago. Several different waves, I believe from the Marquesas Islands, maybe a later group from Tahiti. We don't really know. With the first pre-contact population before Hawaii was contacted by the non-Polynesian world. As far as we know, we don't really know pre-contact population. It was estimated between 300,000 and a million. We don't really know. But first, as far as we know, the first outsider to contact, non-Polynesian person to contact Hawaii was Captain Cook. In 1770, the famous British explorer, Captain James Cook, in 1778. He was killed there. He basically is pretty not a very good first contact experience. He apparently was pretty heavy-handed. He apparently stole a temple, took down wood from a temple, an idol, and used it for firewood or something like that. And there was a lot of local conflict. At one point, he kidnapped a local king. They killed him. He was killed there, and they left. So they didn't get a very good first impression. People of Hawaii didn't get a good first impression. Shortly after that, there was a lot of contact from the U.S., merchants, missionaries, a lot of European Western missionaries, particularly American missionaries. Hawaii was first king or central king. There were a series of complicated civil wars. Late 18th century and early 19th century is very complicated. But the first king was King Kamehameha, or Kamehameha the First, Kamehameha the Great. He unified a unified state in 1795, conquered these other groups, and kind of influenced by European ideas. He used European technology, guns, and some 18 or so. There was, by the way, a hereditary class system, the Kapu system. It was kind of a system of myths, taboos, and it forced a class system. It wasn't as severe or as extreme as some like later, more developed urban civilizations. In Marxism, Friedrich Engels' famous Origin of the Family, Private Property in the State, based on American anthropologist Henry Louis Morgan, that discussed Hawaii, discussed the class system. It wasn't like a fully developed system later urban civilizations had, but it was on the way. It wasn't super extreme, but it was a hereditary class system. Okay, it was called the Kapu system of taboos and myths. And there was something of a feminist or women's uprising against this in 1819. Really interesting. Details are extremely complicated. But apparently among the aristocracy there was a strict taboo against men and women eating together, having meals together. Some type of segregation was enforced with the death penalty. A man and woman ate together, they'd get the death penalty, apparently. But there was when the queen or a woman in the aristocracy rebelled against this rebellion against this, and much of the part of the Kabu system was scrapped, and more of somewhat egalitarian relationships between men and women was built. That's really interesting. 1840, Hawaii became a constitutional monarchy. Early 19th century, there were horrific plagues, cholera epidemics, brought by the foreigners, Europeans, which wiped out a large part of the population. This happened to Native Americans, indigenous people in Australia, and lots of other people. It wiped out a large percentage of the population. I don't know what there are different estimates, a quarter, a fifth, different estimates of how much. Native population still hasn't recovered their pre-contact level, whatever that was. Okay, so plantation Like the Hawaii originally they were okay with having like a multicultural, multi-ethnic society. They were okay with that, and they encouraged people to settle there, like Westerners and other people settled there. Very early on, Japanese people immigrated to Hawaii. Very early on, Japanese immigration. Anyway, the became a plantation economy. The plantations were run by largely descendants of American missionaries. They were close tied with the missionaries. Their plantations became a dominant pineapple, sugarcane, other crops. Plantations became very, very, very powerful. And in the late 19th century, there were a series of basically power struggles between the monarchy, the Hawaiian monarchy, which represented the indigenous people, and these plantation owners. Their vehicle of the plantation owners was called the Reform Party, or sometimes called the Missionary Party, or the Downtown Party. It was the distant ancestor of what became the Hawaiian Republican Party, actually. Anyway, there were a whole series of conflicts. Basically, there was what's called the Bayonet Constitution of 1887. Essentially, the plantation owners had a militia, and they essentially forced the king of Hawaii, and I forget this person's name, but the king of Hawaii, they forced him to agree to this constitution, which some ways it sounds good. It would allow for some accountability, like the monarchy was spending way too much money on the Iolani Palace, beautiful palace, but spending too much money, some accountability. But the thing is, with this constitution, disenfranchised the indigenous population, had very strict property qualifications, so Hawaiian people were disenfranchised in their own country. And also non-Europeans were as well, like migrant workers couldn't become Filipino or whatever. Migrant workers couldn't become citizens. It pretty much dominated white plantation class running things, solidified this, and obviously was very much resented. This was, I believe, 1887. They called it the Bayonet Constitution of 1877. Well, I should mention also the U.S. Navy kind of played a role. U.S. Navy wanted Pearl Harbor. It's a part of Honolulu, beautiful harbor. The U.S. Navy throughout the 1870s badly wanted that harbor to use it, and they did sign an agreement, like some type of agreement to use it in 1875. So for a while, even when Hawaii was an independent country, it was a U.S. Navy base. And later on, the Navy, 1880s, kind of seemed to lose interest in it for a while, but then they, of course, famous base now. So it's a complicated story. So, as I said, there was rebellion of 1887, or the Bayonet Constitution of 1887. The year after that, 1888, this is called the Wilcox Rebellion, when plantation guys tried to coup against the monarchy. There was this Bayonet Constitution was widely resented, and there was a movement among indigenous Hawaiians against it. There was a huge petition drive, a huge movement against this. So to forestall this, there was an attempt at a coup, the Wilcox Rebellion, which failed, actually. It failed, and they were put on treason trials. These settlers and plantation owners were Hawaiian citizens. It was a country. They were citizens. Anyway, this was considered treason. They were put on trial. I don't know what happened. People might have been hung. I don't really know what happened. But after the Wilcox Rebellion, the monarchy was actually overthrown in 1893. It was essentially a 10-day civil war. It wasn't a pushover. It was a 10-day civil war. And the U.S. kind of connived at it. The U.S. consul kind of connived at it in some ways. There's some Navy forces, U.S. Navy forces there. They connived at it. Well, the U.S. officially opposed it. Grover Cleveland, who was president, was kind of anti-imperialist in some ways, not in our sense, but in the modern sense, but he opposed it. He opposed this, and the British and the Japanese, who were major powers in the Pacific then, really opposed it. They bitterly protested it, but it was considered, which was an illegitimate act. It was a power grab on behalf of the plantation class. Not that I support monarchy. I'm obviously not a fan of any sort of monarchy, but the monarchy represented the queen, and I forget her name. I should know her name. I forget her name, but she was the focal point for indigenous resistance against this power grip. And there were European settlers who were on both sides. It wasn't strictly settlers against the indigenous people. There were some settlers who supported the monarchy, who supported it was not completely black and white, but it was definitely a power grab on behalf of the plantation class. And was so anyway, monarchy was overthrown 1893. For a few years, Hawaii was technically a republic, the Republic of Hawaii, and was annexed by the U.S. in 1898. And this was really opposed by indigenous people. There's a petition. I think indigenous population was in 40,000 by then, dropped to 40,000 people. But there was a petition, various petitions signed by virtually the entire indigenous population. They really bitterly protested annexation by the U.S., but didn't matter. When McKinley was president, he got involved in the Filipino Wars, beginning of wars. What academic historians call U.S. imperialism. Academic historians, like it's a study, academic study of imperialism means one specific area from the Filipino War, from a Filipino insurrection, that period, officially early 1900s, officially considered U.S. American imperialism. Ignores the fact that the U.S. has long been an imperialist country, and so I say, but they don't touch that area. Academic, sorry, U.S. history and academia, it's U.S. imperialism is one specific area in general. Okay, anyway, so Hawaii was annexed 1898, and for the first 4 years, it didn't have any direct local rule. It was run directly from Washington, D.C., as far as I understand. Only 4 years later, got some home rule, local rule. But it was ruled effectively a colony of the U.S. Navy for 60 years, served under military occupation for 60 years, and on behalf of the plantation owners, there were five firms. There's a term five families and five firms, five big plantation firms. They were interlocking. They were sitting on each other's board of directors. There was like a tight-knit plantation aristocracy who just kind of ran Hawaii. They had a stranglehold on Hawaii. They brought over first Puerto Rican workers to work sugarcane industry, and then Filipinos. Both Puerto Rico and the Philippines were U.S. colonies, and they brought over lots of people. Japanese people, I said very early on, the Japanese immigration, I think 1920, according to a survey, Japanese people made up 47% of the population of Hawaii. They were the single largest group. They're not as large now, but they played a big role. What is really interesting, well, the Japanese community, Japanese immigrants to Hawaii, originally brought over Buddhist priests, and they kind of ran these communities. They were kind of tyrannical, pretty heavy and tyrannical. Buddhist priests ran the local Japanese communities in Hawaii, and they were very tyrannical. There was rebellion against them. And so the Japanese largely converted to Christianity, Protestant by Methodist or Protestant denominations, and they vote Democratic now. But Japanese Americans on the mainland, they remain Buddhist and they vote Republican. I'm not entirely sure why. By FDR, Franklin Roosevelt put them in concentration camps, and he was a Democrat. That might be some of the reason, but some other stuff going on. I don't know the current situation, but this is interesting. I mean, a lot of Japanese in Hawaii are also Buddhist. It's a U.S. state with a very large Buddhist population, so it's kind of interesting. Okay, so it's December 7th, Pearl Harbor, 1941. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. That was in response to the U.S. Cutting off their oil supply, basically, and there's imperialist challenge between the U.S. and Japan. Most Japanese Americans, Japanese people in Hawaii were loyal, regarding themselves as loyal Americans. They were in the mainland. Japanese Americans were put in internment camps, concentration camps, effectively. They couldn't do this in Hawaii. They talked about it. They couldn't do this to Japanese people in Hawaii because the economy would shut down. They're a large part of the population. The economy would shut down. They weren't able to do it. Some people talked about doing it. There was mistrust of Japanese Americans on Hawaii. But, okay, the Democratic Revolution of 1954 essentially was the culmination of, was basically a working class uprising, which started in 1944 towards the end of the Second World War. There were general strikes, there were marches, there were factory workers' occupations, pretty fierce labor unrest for a time. Partly led by the Communist Party of Hawaii, which had a fairly large presence for a time. The Communist Party and the ILWU, Radical Longshoremen's Union, which merged with another group. And also it was a coalition with the Democratic Party. There was some entryism. I don't know all the details, but apparently Communist Party members joined the Democratic Party and partly moved leftwards. One of the leaders, leader of it was a guy named John Burns. And interesting guy. He was apparently came from, I believe, Montana originally. He moved to Hawaii sometime in the 1930s. He was a cop, and apparently he was active afterwards in the Policemen's Benevolent Association, and he became an organizer. He was a Democratic Party politician, but he had a coalition with the Communist Party and the ILWU. He helped, and the Communists played a big role in organizing this. So what they officially call the Democratic Revolution of 1954 is this culmination of this labor unrest and working class uprising. Democrats won, swept the elections, and as John Burns became later on became governor of Hawaii a bit later, he led this coalition. The FBI came in and destroyed the Communist Party before this time, like 1951. Some of the top leaders of the Hawaiian Communist Party were arrested. UAC, famous House Un-Americans Activities Committee, had like a kangaroo court, and basically destroyed the Communist Party in Hawaii. It went underground for a while, or they officially went underground, disintegrated. I haven't found much on it after this. But anyway, this Democratic Revolution of 1954 kind of smashed the political power of the plantation owners. It brought more people into the system, modernized it, and a lot of afterwards. And this John Burns became governor of Hawaii in 1960. Hawaii became a state in 1959. A lot of people mainly in the U.S., continental U.S., were kind of reluctant, combination of reasons. Racism is a big part of it. Hawaii would have like a non-white majority, and people were concerned about that, and also concerned about the Communist Party. Communist Party had thought to have some influence in Hawaii, and just during the McCarthy period, the Red Scare period, the original period of the Cold War, and people were uptight about that. Really interesting that it was done like Alaska became a state in 1960, I believe, or roughly around the same time. It was originally thought that Hawaii would be a Republican state and Alaska would be a Democratic state. The American duopoly, Republican, Democrat, for like over 100 years to corrupt political parties. But anyway, it was a duopoly at the time. So anyway, it turned out to be the exact opposite. Hawaii became a Democratic Party state, while Alaska became a Republican state. But anyway, John Burns became the first governor, and Hawaii became a state. He made some reforms, land reform and environmental laws, and to some extent, the power of the plantation bosses was partly broken. He modernized Hawaii, built up the University of Hawaii in Honolulu, and tourism boom began like around that time. Hawaii was promoted as a tropical paradise, and became a huge tourist attraction. There was one guy who was later Burns' lieutenant governor. He was elected governor for a while in the 60s. His lieutenant governor, I forget the guy's name, but there was a bit of a falling out. His group around John Burns became more of the corrupt, not corrupt, but this fossilized establishment. There was some rebellion against him. I don't know all the details. But Hawaii has generally been a solidly Democratic Party state in a lot of ways. There's the anti-war protests during the Vietnam War era, the protest movement. There was a staging area, troops going to Vietnam, of course. There's the sovereignty movement, which started in the 1960s, 70s, a whole series of grassroots movement, largely big within the indigenous community, came in the wake of the American Indian movement, Native American movements, radical movements in the U.S. and else, indigenous rights movements and everywhere else, and they fought against sovereignty. Basically, at the heart of it, moving towards having Hawaii an independent country. And they show respect for non-indigenous Hawaiians. We have nothing against non-indigenous Hawaiians, but it's big on environmental activism. There are a couple of things going on. There's the Red Hill, a couple of dramatic environmental campaigns, and the military, as I said, it's a huge presence in Hawaii, and enormously polluting and destructive. So there's what they call the Kaho'olawe Island. It was depopulated. I think not many people live there. 100 or so people live there, but they were evicted in the 1944 during the Second World War, and it was used for decades as a testing range for the U.S. Navy. They would shell it like Vieques in Puerto Rico. And there's a campaign, like grassroots campaigns for decades to end this. It finally did. In the 1990s, it was made to a nature preserve, and it was cleaned up somewhat, made to a nature preserve. There's a decades-long campaign about that. There is a Red Hill water crisis. The Navy contaminated most of the groundwater of Oahu. A large part of their drinking supply was contaminated by fuel and other things. This big crisis happened a couple of years ago. Big crisis. I don't quite know how it was resolved, or if it was resolved. I don't really know. You don't hear much about it right now. That was a big part of it. There was Mauna Lea observatories, series of observatories. I believe it's an island of Hawaii. They're on what's regarded as sacred land, indigenous sacred land, and environmentally not really that great either. There were a series of big campaigns to stop the expansion. It failed, actually. One campaign was very recently. But all these were focal points of the sovereignty rights movement, and there are a whole series of local, more not as famous, local campaigns against environmental destruction. And there's the aloha philosophy. Like Hawaii is the only state with an official state philosophy. I don't know if it's an academic philosophy, but it's indigenous. It comes from indigenous beliefs of mutual obligation, things like that. In 1993, I believe, the U.S. Congress, both houses of the U.S. Congress passed a resolution officially apologizing for the overthrow of the monarchy. It was like 100 years too late, but apologized for it and I think declared an illegal act. And according to the UN, the legal status of Hawaii is a bit ambiguous. I mean, it's a U.S. state, and the U.S. is not going to leave anytime soon, but it's legally a bit ambiguous, as strange as that sounds. Okay, there was the Akaka bill, which was proposed by U.S. Congress, but didn't go anywhere. It was opposed by a lot of indigenous people. It was supposed to give the land back to indigenous people, but done in a very paternalistic way, and also codified illegal land seizures, essentially. So that was very unpopular. Okay. So the fire on Maui occurred in the beginning of this month. Was August 5th. There was a series of horrific fires on the island of Maui, and particularly on Lahaina, was the downtown, the historic center of Lahaina was burnt to the ground, totally destroyed. Horrific tragedy. So far, there are around 110 people officially dead. It's believed to be much more, many more, maybe as many as 1,000. We don't know for sure, but it's believed most of the children have died. Okay, whole series of weird screw-ups and disasters. Whole series. First, before I get to that, Maui is a playground of the rich and famous, playground of the glitterati, and there are a zillion movie stars, high-profile figures who have houses on Maui and spend part of the year there. Some of these people, some of the movie star people, Jim Carrey has a house on Maui. Woody Harrelson, actor has a house on Maui. Carlos Santana has a house on Maui. Sammy Hagar from Van Halen has a house on Maui. Lars Ulrich from Metallica has a house on Maui. Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson have places on there. On Maui, Paul Simon has a place on Maui. To his credit, Paul Simon apparently has been donating a lot of money to environmental groups and indigenous rights groups. To his credit, Randy Travis, the country singer, has a house on Maui. Justin Bieber has a house on Maui. Will Smith, and I'm sure I'm leaving some people out here. I'm sure I'm leaving a lot of people out here. Some more famous people who I'm missing. The high-profile oligarchs, Silicon Valley oligarchs have a presence, have a place in Maui. Jeff Bezos owns a house on Maui. Bill Gates owns a house on Maui. Peter Thiel owns a house on Maui. Mark Zuckerberg. Larry Ellison. I mentioned Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle. He owns an entire island, Lanai, which is 9 miles away from Maui. And I believe the ferry, there's a ferry. It's, he owns like 98% of the island. He bought it a few years ago. Or bought it like 2012, I believe. There are people living on Lanai, 33,400 people living there. There's a town there, people live there. Has a 25-bed hospital, has a combined elementary high school there. And he literally bought the entire town, bought all the housing stock, bought all the businesses, recently bought the newspaper, the town newspaper, which is the only thing he didn't own. He bought everything there. I believe a couple of three luxury resorts. The Hawaiian, I forget the franchise, but he owns the Hawaiian branch of this resort. There's a branch of this resort. There's a luxury golf course there. Bill and Melinda Gates got married on that golf course in, I don't know, 2012. I don't remember the year, but they got married there. So yeah, one guy, he owns the entire island. Some people were moving from the island, say, I don't feel we own this anymore. The island Lanai is called Pineapple Island. It was owned by the entire island was a plantation. It was like a company town type thing. And what's going on with Larry Ellison might be just a continuation of this. I don't really know the details. If the resort's the main employer there, I don't really know. But one guy owns the whole island. There is a ferry, a public ferry. You can take it from Maui, from Lahaina. And it's a remnant of the days before neoliberalism, when there actually were public services. It was cool to do things like that. So you can go to the island, walk around and stuff. You can go, but he owns the whole thing. Okay. So, land use policy. So that's one thing. The oligarchs. Oh yeah, Oprah. Oprah is a huge landowner there, and she's buying up more land all the time. I forget all the details, but she's a major. And we don't know why. She's buying up more land. She owns like a 150-acre place one area and a couple hundred acres in someplace else. She's buying up more land. Oprah, I believe, is worth $5 billion. Larry Ellison, I believe, he's worth $25 billion. And there's other people, gazillionaires. They're buying. And I don't begrudge, like, artists and creative people, Carlos Santana, Willie Nelson. I don't begrudge these people at all. I mean, I can't afford a place on Maui, but I don't begrudge some of these people, creative people. I hate capitalism. I don't believe in the system anyway, but I don't begrudge somebody. Sure, why not some of these people? But these billionaires and gazillionaires, they're pretty insidious. There's one area, Justin Bieber owns a place in Hawaii. Now I don't know if I mentioned that. Okay, so there's region of Maui, like Kapalua, which is a housing development in the northwest tip of Maui, which is the wealthy area, super wealthy area. And part of other areas are as well. That's a super wealthy area, real estate area. The website is interesting to read. Their website selling houses, super wealthy area. Okay. So a problem in Maui and other areas of Hawaii was land management. Lots of people mention land management has been a problem. The plantations closed like from the 1970s, mostly in the 80s and 90s. Sugarcane, pineapple, you can grow it cheaper in Malaysia, Philippines, elsewhere. So if they ship it from other parts of the world, they don't grow in Hawaii. The plantations closed. And basically the land was fallow after that. They didn't do anything with the land. So Maui particularly has large areas of land which are fallow now, and there's invasive weeds. One species, I forget the name of one particular species of invasive weeds everywhere. And in fact, if you go to Hawaii, they check you at the airport very closely. They'll check you whether you're from anywhere, the mainland U.S. or anywhere else. They'll make sure you don't bring any invasive species with you. But there's invasive plant. I forget the name of it. But anyway. It's in the warm season. This is the warm season. Hawaii has a wet season and a dry season. This is the dry season. And it's very arid. And we think of Hawaii as very lush tropical paradise, and some parts of it are. But large parts of Hawaii are fairly dry. Part of the year are fairly dry. From high school earth science, the wind patterns, they hit a mountain, and then the water vapor in it precipitates, but the area other side of the mountain is dry. Similar dynamics in Hawaii. I won't go into the details, but parts of it are very dry during parts of the year. And people have mentioned climate change. Doesn't seem to have been a major factor. Like some environmental activists have said that, basically the temperatures hovered around the 80s. Sometimes higher, sometimes lower, basically around the 80s. Over the decades, there hasn't been a dramatic change in the local temperature. It hovered around And there hasn't been a dramatic change in wind patterns either, as far as I know. Maybe it's been slightly drier, but we don't really know. Anyway, so a lot of people are saying Pay's blog, Pam Ho. She writes some interesting stuff. She's a blogger. I don't know much about her, but I've seen her stuff shared in a lot of places I read, a lot of online things I read. So she mentioned the agricultural, the land use policy. There's a guy, environmentalist Clay Trinick, Hawaiian environmentalist. He's at the University of Honolulu. He's a botanist and a wildfire specialist. He's been saying for years, and other people have as well, that we got to do something about it. This is dangerous. Having these dry, the fields lying fallow, and then the dry season could, these decaying vegetation could catch fire easily. We got to do something about this. And there's a campaign, like in Europe, something like billions of dollars are spent on agriculture to subsidize, keep land in cultivation. And there's been a move to do something like this in Hawaii, at least some fire prevention. Apparently there was a bill making its way through the Hawaiian state legislature. Said $1.4 million, not much, $1.4 million to fire prevention in this area, but it died in committee. So poor land management has blamed for this. Pam Ho mentioned it was inevitable what happened. It was a fire waiting to happen. I don't know enough about it, but so that's one take on it. Another take, a lot of people blame Hawaiian Electric, the electrical company. It was Maui Electric. It was bought out by Hawaiian Electric, which didn't have much local control or local accountability anyway. And they didn't do nearly, they were widely blamed for not cleaning, not doing adequate fire prevention, not, a spark could easily ignite fire, cleaning debris from their transformers and way. And there's an environmental writer, Michael Schellenberger. Interesting guy. I have very mixed feelings about Schellenberger. He's a contrarian. He really strongly criticized the corporate environmentalist movement. I totally agree with him there. He worked with Matt Taibbi and the Twitter files, and liberals hate him. He said some really worthwhile stuff. He says some stuff I don't really agree with him. He's big on aliens. He apparently claimed the government has the congressional hearings about UFOs and aliens. He said the government is he says there's 6 witnesses. He had 1 degree of separation. There's 6 people who've seen aliens, and he's been pushing that. He's also a turf. Apparently on Twitter, he shared an article which is on paywall. You have to subscribe to his Twitter account or whatever they call it. You have to subscribe to it. But how transgender movement is destroying the transgender war against the family. Like what? There's no transgender. So he's apparently moving to the political right. And some of the stuff. But, he once in a while, I've seen interviews and read some of his articles. He does say some worthwhile stuff. Anyway, he was pushing this very hard, talking about this a lot, the irresponsibility of Hawaii Electric for not cleaning the debris away, adequate fire prevention. And he says they were spending more money on, renewables or renewable energy. He thinks there's more money in it, as strange as it sounds. So he was I don't know if I agree with him. I don't know nearly enough about it, but he was blaming more the corporate environmental movement. There's more money in moving towards so-called renewable energy, solar, and they were spending, Hawaiian Electric was spending all their money on that instead of adequate fire prevention. I don't know enough about it, but he makes a plausible case. So that was fire prevention, adequate fire prevention. And by the way, Hawaiian Electric there's civil lawsuits against them now. Their stock is nosediving. Plummet, I think it's lost 3/4 of its value in the last few weeks, and they're taking them. Some people feel that they're being used as a scapegoat. I don't know. I'll talk about that in a minute. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. I'll talk about that in a minute. So these things. Now, a couple weird things happened during this fire. First of all, the school was closed. There's combination elementary high school. It was closed the previous day. There were wildfires in Maui, other parts of Maui, other end of the island. There were a couple of wildfires, not as bad. And so they closed the schools. The next day, there was wind, very heavy wind, so they decided to close the schools, which meant the children were at home. Their parents, though, did not get the day off from work. Very windy and there's danger of wildfire, but the parents had to work. And I'm not sure what the biggest employers there are, but the parents had to work. They did not. So the kids were home. This put them at risk. If they stayed in the school, they presumably either they had a shelter there they could have stayed in, or they could have evacuated them easier. So it's one big, huge screw up, the kids' room. And it's believed a lot of children died. It's believed, we don't know this for sure, but it's believed, we haven't gotten the full death toll. Official death toll is like 110 or something. It's believed to be at least 1,000, maybe in the thousands. We don't really know. Over 1,000 people are unaccounted for. So the school closed. That's one thing. Another thing really odd is the alarms didn't go off. Hawaii, apparently, state of Hawaii has like a state-of-the-art alarm system. There are 800 alarms throughout the islands. I think 40 on Maui itself. There it's a state-of-the-art, very high-tech, lavishly praised. They did not go off. Apparently, a guy, Herman Andaya, who was in charge of the emergency warning system, he apparently said it's oriented towards tsunamis. And, you know, if the alarms went off, people would assume it's a tsunami and people would go head for the hills, like get away from the water, the coast, head for the hills. And he said that would be the wrong place to go. That's where the fire was. They'd be heading. And other people pushed back. Says, you know, it says on the website, the alarm system website, that in their mandates included wildfires, warning people about wildfires. And, you know, people would know enough. They would see smoke or smell smoke coming from that area. They'd know enough not to head into the wildfire. So the alarms did not go off. Herman Andaya was a guy in charge of it. I forget his position. But people say he got in over his head. He did not have a huge background in this background in some other field. He got the job out of 40 other candidates. I don't know what was going on. I don't know, but you know, I don't know what was going on. But apparently, he made a major screw up. People did get text alerts and things like that, but it didn't reach nearly as many people. If you're at work, you're not going to Amber Alerts. I mean, you're not going to check it. So that was a contributing factor to that. Another thing, there was some wrangling over water supply. Apparently, the guy who was in charge of distributing water, okaying releasing water, didn't wrangle for like over an hour and a half. Refused to release a lot of the water. His name was M. Kalia Manuel. And apparently Jimmy Dore we've talked about him briefly, and I'm just going by what was on the Jimmy Dore show take that for what it's worth. Apparently he's described as an indigenous practitioner, like indigenous environmentalism or stuff like that. And he explained why he didn't want to release the water. Something like we regard water as sacred, and you know the gods entrusted us with sacred trust in the water. It's a system of mutual obligations. So he was reluctant to release the water for that purpose, and you know, he came off as a New Age flake, to be blunt about it. I mean, I think certainly we can learn a lot from indigenous practices of land use. Absolutely, absolutely. But this guy, at least the way it was portrayed, he came off, you know, kind of weird. And I don't know what was going on. I can't say I know everything what was going on. These guys, me, often in disasters, tragedies like this, lower level people use as fall guys, like focus for popular anger. Maybe these guys were just placed in a really bad situation. I don't know. I'm just going, this is impressionistic and I don't know. Another thing, big thing happened. Numerous people are reporting the police didn't let people leave. Wouldn't let people. There was a whole long line of hundreds of cars, the police just not letting people leave, in or out. And nobody knows why this was. There was one guy, a local, like a souvenir seller from a local character. He sold souvenirs and stuff from a popular restaurant there for years. And he reported this. Other people were reporting this. The police blockaded cars leaving. People were desperate to get out of the city. Lahaina, desperate to get out of there. And the police were not letting people leave. And there's stories of people died in their cars exploded. I mean, the heat wave comes, it just kills it's just a blast, it kills everything. People died in their cars. At one point, people just ran for the water. They're not too far from the beach, and they just ran. Some people drowned in the undertow, by the way. One person claimed they got 67 dead people from the water. It was horrific. I don't know everything that's going on. It was totally horrific. There were a whole series, and no one knows why they did this. The cops eventually, this went on, they blockaded cars for over an hour. Finally, they let people finally leave, but people died in their cars, stories of cars exploding, some weird stories like that. And okay, so that was going on. Now there are lots and lots of suspicions. First of all, property value is a working class. Lahaina, the area that was destroyed, was largely a working class area. And my dog is getting very antsy, but it's largely a working class area. So hold on, buddy. So it's largely a working class area. Their property value has escalated like $1 million. People have gone house $5 million. Property value has been going up the roof, and property taxes are really low. Many of these people, by the way, are not insured. They've owned the house and generally owned their property for generations, but kind of complicated. Some indigenous Hawaiian philosophy of land ownership is somewhat different and complicated. For various complicated reasons, a lot of these people have trouble getting their houses, getting their property insured. They legally own it, but they've had trouble getting it fully insured. I don't know the numbers, what percentage of people this affects, but a lot of people lost everything they owned. They were totally wiped out by this. They're not insured. So that was a big problem. So there are all kinds of weird, widely believed it's a land grab. A lot of suspicions is a land grab by the elites. The gazillionaires want that land. Most people refuse to sell. They've been there for generations, but they're not going to sell land, get them off their land. Like a second trial of tears under Andrew Jackson. I think it was the early 1830s, if I remember. The Cherokee Nation was kicked out of Georgia, large areas, state of Georgia and Tennessee, where they lived. They were expelled. And apparently they had modern farming techniques, and they got along. They were westernized. They got along well with local farmers. There wasn't a lot of racial antagonism. It was a land grab by real estate speculators. They wanted them out. They wanted to sell. It was a land grab. And we may be seeing the same thing. There's a lot of suspicion. I don't know. One person mentioned, I can't say this is true. I can't say this is true, but there's a theory. There are theories all over TikTok and Twitter and elsewhere. Theories about what suspicions. Okay, one person mentioned the not letting people out is deliberately to kill them. They want these people not just off their land. They want them dead, so they're not going to file lawsuits or try to get their land back. Campaign to totally eliminate the population. I don't know. I'm not saying it's true or not. I agree with this, but I don't know. Okay, now, big thing is there's a lot of suspicion about. Now, first, hear me out here. First, there's profound mistrust of the mainstream, of the media, and of most institutions of our society. Rightfully so. The media lies to us about everything. I mean, literally, they lie about the Ukraine war. They've lied about COVID. They've blatantly lie about everything. You look up Google the Ukraine war or any really major super third rail controversial thing, COVID, Ukraine, anything. You look it up on Google, you'll find list all kinds of stories, all kinds of everything is a debunked conspiracy theory, debunked conspiracy theory, debunked conspiracy theory. You look it up on Yandex, which is a Russia-based search engine, or you look it up on Yandex, which is like a Russia-based search engine, or Brave. Both are kind of censorship-free search engines. You come up with totally different results. Google especially is censored highly. It's not a search engine. It's a propaganda engine. They have narratives they want. They have stories they want, and it's a CNN security state narrative. Sometimes this narrative is true. Sometimes it isn't. Most of the time it isn't. So, and free debate and discussion is not allowed on social media. It's censorship. More and more censorship crackdown. So, this creates a lot of cynicism. A lot of profound mistrust. Whether this is always warranted, I don't know. People are not stupid. People understand the media is manipulated. People are not stupid. And there are batshit crazy conspiracy theories. Doesn't mean the Illuminati or reptilian, shape-shifting reptilians are running things, or these elaborate Illuminati is giving secret signals at concerts. Doesn't mean you believe every batshit crazy conspiracy theory. Of course not. And not even some of the stuff is bullshit, but some of this might have a grain of truth. Okay. The story of idea of direct energy weapons, which are essentially targeted microwave attacks. The military has this capability. They've openly unveiled it. The Navy has that. They can do this. They've bragged about it. It's not used a lot. You can actually create a forest fire or a fire from a distance, from a drone. Essentially, it's a microwave attack. and using microwave radiation, not laser beam, but microwave radiation. We know this ability exists. So there are some theories, although it's a lot of it all over Twitter and TikTok videos, that this was a DEW attack. It was deliberate. Now, I kind of thought, no, batshit crazy conspiracy theory. This is nonsense. Usually Occam's razor, the most easiest, plausible explanation is the best. I think the land use theory or Schellenberger's stuff about Hawaii Electric, their irresponsibility. That yeah, there's a forest fire waiting to happen. Well, I had listened to an interview last night on Rumble. They don't allow this stuff on YouTube, but an interview on Rumble with two white environmentalists from Hawaii. I believe they're both in Maui. They've spent decades in environmental activism, and they're not right-wing QAnon types. Right-wing, they've spent decades in environmental activism. They seem like leftists or sort of semi-countercultural leftists. Guy Bruce Douglas and the other guy's Paul DeSoloris. Both of them seem to come from an engineering background. They're not QAnon types at all. And they talked about this very reasonable, I'll be with you in a minute. Talked about this very reasonable. There were, as far as this fire, the wildfire had a lot of anomalies. Things don't come. First thing, trees often didn't burn. Trees standing next to structures, houses and other structures, burnt. Like the Paradise, California fire, and I think it was 2018. There's a scene, trailers. This is numerous photos. It's not just hearsay. Numerous photographic evidence. Numerous photos of this. And it's well-known phenomenon. Numerous in these fires. There are a line of trailers. The trailers were all gone, burnt to the ground, and trees next to them were still standing, sometimes with leaves. And this happened in Maui fire as well. There are structures. The house would be all gone. Trees next to them would still be standing. And that's odd. I don't know a huge amount about wildfires, but that's odd. Another thing besides that is trees did burn, but they burnt from the inside. Like, there are numerous photos, again, not hearsay, but numerous photos of this. Trees were burned from inside the trunk, from the interior. Trees were burned from the inside. Oh, my dog's getting really upset. But numerous trees were burned from the inside. Another thing, plastic didn't burn. Some of these houses were burnt to the ground. A plastic toy, a piggy bank, or some toy would be found. Tupperware would often be found. Okay. My dog's getting very upset. Tupperware would be found, wouldn't be burned. Another thing, metal burned, which is kind of unusual. Metal often burned. And these environmentalists went over this very carefully. Two environmentalists went over this very carefully. And they said this kind of goes along with microwave radiation. You put something in a microwave plastic doesn't burn, metal does. You know, you put a microwave oven, you put a fork or a knife accidentally, which happened to me a couple times, like a spoon. You want to heat something up, you put a spoon in it, it'll start sparking. It'll attract heat, it'll attract all the heat. Plastic won't. And this is constant with a microwave-induced fire. So I'm not going to be the motivation of this. Now, first, batshit crazy. Oh, it's crazy. Well, U.S. ruling class is a group of people who think nothing of killing 500,000 Iraqi children. I think killing 500,000 Iraqi children was worth it. Madeleine Albright said this. Hillary Clinton thought Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, was anally raped to death. Hillary Clinton thought this was hysterically funny. She laughed at it. Okay, these people are freaking psychopaths. Don't put it, they're not going to do this? Oh, they very much would do this. Now, conspiracy is simply, conspiracy theory trope was popularized by the CIA in the wake of the Kennedy assassination. I think 1967, the Warren Commission, the official story of it. Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman, anything, and Mark Lane, other people wrote, became widely believed, and the official story didn't quite add up. Okay, so the conspiracy theory trope was popularized to discredit. That's a conspiracy theory. No, conspiracy is simply the rule when the ruling class does things, and that people don't like, and they do this all the time. The ruling class has venues where they meet. The World Economic Forum is just one of them. There's so many others, venues where they meet which are not accessible to working class people, where they make decisions. It's not like an octopus, the Illuminati or manipulating. That's a conspiracy theory, and I don't believe that. There are, ruling class does have areas where they meet, they make decisions, and so it's a conspiracy theory. Now, this makes sense from a Marxist perspective. And I talked about this in an earlier video. I think the World Economic Forum is a real thing, and the Great Reset is a real thing. It's a public relations disaster for them. They're just the spokespeople for the global capitalism. They're the spokespeople for it. Now, Marx, very, very complicated, and I might go into another video. Basically, this stage of capital accumulation is reaching its end. You can approach this from whole different areas. The overaccumulation of capital. The U.S. is, I believe, $33 trillion in debt. And there's nothing wrong with deficit spending, but this is massive. And U.S. industrial base has been hollowed out. U.S. hegemony is preserved by the petrodollar, keeps the value of the dollar high. And the U.S. military rampaging around the world. The empire is in decay, and this cycle of capital accumulation is nearing its end. And there, talking about a new currency. There's the BRICS, and people talking about the BRICS, but also the Western ruling class. They may be moving towards a central bank digital currencies. Theories may be coming from different directions, part of a global power grab, pushing us into some techno-feudal. It could be in one level just a land grab against the indigenous people, which it probably is. The suspicions is something much greater. There was a tech conference earlier this year, I believe, on Maui, making Maui proposals to make Maui a smart island, which would mean much greater surveillance and things like that. And there's a lot of suspicions. There's the 2030 agenda, which some of the stuff sounds really good. Most people on the left would probably support it. It sounds good, but they're using environmentalism on behalf of billionaires. There's some insidious agendas. And I'm not saying it's direct energy weapons. What I'm saying is more some weird stuff going. There are a lot of anomalies. And, if you think I'm a batshit crazy, I'm not saying it is. If you think I'm a batshit crazy conspiracy theorist, you can unsubscribe. I hope you don't. But anyway, that's some of my take on it. I think we should be open to Hawaii tragedy. We should be open to... Oh, yeah, that's stuff I meant to mention either. The government response has been really bad. Joe Biden famously, he was asked 3 times, would you have any statements? No comment. The third time, first 2 times, no comment. He probably wasn't even aware of it. Third time, I believe he was making a speech in Ohio on the economy, and he offered $700. $700 grant or $700 assistance, which is nothing, very meager. People who lost everything is a joke. There's billions we're sending in the military, billions in Ukraine. Residents there were pissed off. One guy, local resident there, he said, we sent $40 billion of military assistance to Ukraine. We're getting this is a joke. This is a joke, billions and billions to Ukraine. So, and the Biden administration is kind of keeping some distance. Supposedly next Monday, Biden will go there. I don't know. It's puzzling why he hasn't taken more of an active role. I have some theories by it. Maybe he's elderly and might not make it. He has traveled. He's been to Asia, Malaysia, I believe, the APAC, Asia Pacific Summit or something. Last year, he didn't know what country he was in, I remember. But, he has traveled, but maybe it's a long day. I don't know what's going on. I think it seems they have a strategy to not, the Katrina was considered a bookend to the Bush administration. His popularity plummeted, not so much with the Iraq War, but with Katrina. His guy, I forget his name, you did a great job. Some guy was the head of the Louisiana Gambling Commission or something. He was a friend of Bush, put him in charge. He did a great job. It turned out a horrible job. And this is really dead. So Biden, I think the lesson they took from that is keep distance. Keep as much distance. It'll fall off the media cycle after a few weeks. Like Ohio, East Palestine, Ohio, you don't hear anything about it. It was a complete catastrophe. Both parties are implicated. I think they made decisions to keep some distance. And it'll fall. The media, the shit libs in the media will cover for them. What a great... They'll just ignore it. I think that's my theory. It's kind of odd. You would think Biden would want to look presidential coming into the elections, but he's incapable of doing that for so many reasons. Okay, anyway, it's kind of my take on it. My dogs are getting very upset, and they want to go out, and we should keep our minds open to alternate ideas. Don't follow every batshit crazy conspiracy theory, but, there's some suspicions, well-founded suspicions, some of the things going on. Anyway, thanks, and have a good day.